Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to go through something written by a doctor that worked on the tracing strategy in terms of how it began, how it's gone wrong, where they feel the massive errors in the system are, and adding in a little bit of context from what some others who've been involved in different roles have said as well. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So this piece is written by a doctor working on the test and trace service, and it's published in the British Medical Journal. And I'm just going to go through now. It starts off by reminding of all of us what had happened right at the start of this. So this was in May, and at the time the tracing strategy was supposed to be fully implemented by the 1st of June. This is what Boris Johnson had promised, and he'd made a real fuss about promising it in Parliament when Keir Starmer was asking him in Prime Minister's questions the week before. Boris Johnson on 2 occasions seemed to get quite irritated at the fact he's saying yes, it'd be fully in place, fully in place on the 1st of June. Now, of course, it was not, and in fact a key part of it, the tracing app, has been abandoned. And we're not going to get anything at all until this winter at least. And then what happened, of course, we had the Dominic Cummings scandal. You know, the one where he drove to a castle to test his eyesight because he thought he might be too blind to drive. So he drove himself and his family to a castle. And a distraction was needed. Fairly big distraction. So, and this piece starts off, and I'll put a link in the description below if you want to read it later, but I'm going to sort of actually go through it. It says, on the afternoon of 27th of May 2020, the UK's Prime Minister Boris Johnson told the House of Commons Liaison Committee that it was time to move on from the row about whether his special advisor Dominic Cummings had broken lockdown rules. Hours later, Matt Hancock, the Health Secretary, announced the launch of England's test and trace service. Then it says, the launch was news to me, a doctor and contact tracer, and it would transpire to many others. Now, certainly what happened basically in that day, that evening in fact, and the following day, because this is a doctor, but you also, I think Boris Johnson said that the government had employed 25,000 contact tracers. So these are your minimum wage contact tracers who'll just get on the phone. The idea being you're infected, and then once it's sort of determined that there's a very high chance that you do have the coronavirus, if not you actually definitely do have it, then it's a case of working out who you've been in contact with, and then these contact tracers, these 25,000, would get on the phone to those people and tell them you need to isolate. And what some of these people were saying is, first of all, they hadn't really had any training on how to do this. They had to read a PDF, so text-based training on what to do. And then they were also told, some of them were saying they weren't able to log on either. I mean, they weren't expecting to go on the day they did. Just like this doctor, these contact tracers, these, certain, 25,000, I think it was, had also not been told. Because that's what I mean. It wasn't like they were ready to go early and just went early. Because even then you would, you need the people who are going to do that job to give them some notice. They were being told, some of them the evening before, they had to start the very next day in the morning. And they were saying some of them couldn't log on. They hadn't had their login sorted out properly. Absolute chaos was what was emerging. A lot of these people didn't know what to do. They hadn't had training. They weren't able to log on. Those who could log on, the systems were in meltdown. I mean, you know how it works. A new IT system comes online. What's the first thing that happens? It goes offline straight away. Then it says here, I'd already been redeployed during a year out from my frontline clinical role of 15 years to work as a clinical contact caseworker as part of the test and trace service. As one of 3,000 clinical contact caseworkers, I was meant to speak by telephone to people who had tested positive for COVID-19. I had to conduct a public health risk assessment and identify any potential contacts. At least 18,000 non-clinical call handlers were tasked with following up those contacts. Johnson described it as a world-beating system that would manage 10,000 new cases a day. Now, bearing in mind what that would mean, if this system is going to be able to deal with 10,000 new cases a day, which sounds very impressive, consider just how many people these contact tracers are going to have to contact. You know, if you think about how many people you're going to be in, particularly now with the way the restrictions are now, and a lot of you will be back at work now and out and about. Think about how many people you'll be in contact with. And obviously the strangers you can't possibly tell them about. So they'll never get contacted. The only way to do that is a tracing app. We don't have that. But, you know, work colleagues, family, friends, things like that, you may know you've been in contact with. Think about how many you'd be in contact with, and not on a particular day, over a period of a few weeks, because you may have been infectious for, you know, a week or so before you've tested positive. So consider how many people you'd have to say you were in contact with. And those contact tracers have to contact all of those. So if there's 10,000 cases in a particular day, you know, it could be that there's 100,000 people need contacting, maybe more. And it said here, an email landed in my inbox at 9:48 p.m. on the night of Hancock's announcement. NHS test and trace is going live tomorrow. Then a series of further email and text messages. You are performing a crucial role in the fight against coronavirus. And go live is at 8 a.m. It was a swift turnaround from an NHS professional's message 2 days before. Please remain patient during the sessions as this very much a test environment. So what they're describing here is they'd set up this test environment to let people get acclimatised to it. Just 2 days before, that's what it was. And all of a sudden then, with next to no notice, one night's sleep notice, it's going live. It says many of us had not yet completed training and technical problems put paid to promise mock calls. So, you know, even the sort of trial runs hadn't taken place. And like I was saying about the technical issues and the training not being completed, that was also echoed by the contact tracers, the non-clinical contact tracers. And it says, not that training would have mattered anyway. The contact tracing and advisory service website was inaccessible to me on launch day, and tracers were notified of a critical incident. The health department denied the system had crashed, but acknowledged that there had been some technical difficulties, claiming problems were rapidly being resolved. I mean, that's the thing straight away, isn't it? I'm sorry to pick on the language there, but how can you say something has been rapidly resolved? You can't say it's rapid until it's been resolved and you go, oh, we resolved that really quickly. When it's still ongoing, you haven't solved the problem. You don't know, do you? Anyway, never mind. So during my shifts later that week, there were no cases to trace, an experience echoed by others who spoke to other mainstream media and newspapers labelling the system chaotic and a complete shambles. I'm yet to know anybody who has made a call to a member of the public, said one. So what went wrong? This is where they think it went wrong. One thing seems clear. Too many organisations spoil the broth. NHS professionals employed us as clinical tracers, but we were recruited by Capita and placed with Public Health England. Cytal provided access to the tracing applications and systems, and these all required different usernames and passwords. Right. Synergy CRM assigned cases and held scripts. CTAS captured and contacted tracing information. Ring Central was used for voice calls, and Max Connect was used for storing knowledge about contacts. All of these systems were accessed through Amazon Workspace. Training was initially through Public Health England's LearnSpace and then moved to Health Education England's e-learning for health. When systems are disconnected, cracks rapidly appear. Simply resetting a broken password before a shift required calling Cytal, wait 45 minutes, to log the problem. An Amazon reset password email followed 24 hours later. At times, established systems shone through. Sign up to NHS professionals was smooth. Its platform simplified booking shifts and accessing payslips, but calls about basic training required holding for 45 minutes. Subsequently, this helpline number was withdrawn entirely. Email queries went unanswered. The organisation seemed to have been caught off guard by Hancock's announcement. And again, what you're getting, and this is the impression I'd already had from others, but it's really interesting to see it from the point of view of a clinical contact tracer. The fact that they went with it, no one was prepared for it. Matt Hancock that very morning will not have been expecting to do this. This will have been a case of the Dominic Cummings story isn't going away. We need to lead with something. We're going to say our contact tracing program's going live. And I'm sure Matt Hancock would have said, it's not ready to go live. It's going live. Right. I mean, we can say it's gone live, but then people the next day will point out that it hasn't gone live. Yeah, we'll just tell them it has. And it go, and you can read this, and it goes on, and it's absolutely ridiculous. And again, the thing that I didn't necessarily fully appreciate as well is just how many different companies are all involved in this. And what's we've tried to say from the start, this isn't just a waste of money. You're putting public money in private hands for a service that we're going to need, that the NHS should be taking care of. It does also mean you've got lots of different organisations who are only interested in their stuff. These private contractors will go, right, these are our success criteria. That's all we care about. We don't care if it all links up with everything else. We just make sure that we deliver on what we promise to do, to a rough approximation at any rate, and take our money. And I'm not denying that some of these contractors may not be run by people who really care as well, but ultimately there's no coordination between themselves. Now, if this was all to be run in the NHS, the whole thing would be coordinated by a person, and a problem in one area would be that person's problem. Whereas in this country, you might imagine a problem in any of those areas as the health secretary's problem, but we have a government of ministers that just try to make no problem their problem, someone else's. And we know as well, from recently, as Keir Starmer pointed out last week, that we're not contacting anywhere near enough people. We're only getting to about a third of the people who need contacting with this system. This system that was supposed to be able to handle 10,000 new cases a day, we don't have 10,000 new cases a day. And yet it can't even cope with the much smaller of new cases that we have. This system was supposed to cope with 10,000. And it is a complete shambles. And I do, really recommend that you read the rest of this. I don't want to sort of go on too much, because those, for me, with the real eye-openers. And you look at this and you just think, it's also one of these things that is caused by the current Conservative government's thinking. Their approach to everything about COVID is this same thing. Throw a contract out here, a contract out there. Some of it will be to Tory donors. They're not always. I mean, some people will say, is this company a Tory donor? Is this company? Not all of them are. They're just throwing it out because that's just the way they think. They do not want the NHS to take care of this, because they do not want to demonstrate that actually in a time of crisis, the private sector is not the best people to coordinate a healthcare crisis. You need a large, effectively run public healthcare system. And this is going to feed into everything. When something here goes completely tits up, like the app, they'll not do the right thing the next time. They'll do the wrong thing again, but with a different company. And they'll do it for every problem that crops up. When PPE crops up again this winter, they'll do the same thing they did last time. And I don't actually know what's going to make this stop, because this isn't even a problem that goes away if you get rid of Boris Johnson. It may not be as bad if you got rid of Boris Johnson and got someone sensible in. But even that sensible person is going to still be a Conservative Prime Minister until 2024 at least. And they're still going to have the attitude, we want to give as much of this work to a private company as possible. But anyway, there it is. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button if you'd like to support the channel further. Please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.